In January 2015, Qatar Airways became the launch customer for the Airbus A350. Carbon fiber fuselage, exceptional fuel efficiency, a cabin so quiet passengers said it felt like flying in a library. Qatar staked its entire premium brand on this plane, ordered 53 of them. 7 years later, they were suing the company that built it for $618 million, and Airbus responded by canceling every single order Qatar had. Billions of dollars gone. To understand what happened, you have to understand who Qatar Airways was. Under CEO Akbar al-Baker, Qatar rejected planes over carpet appearance, publicly humiliated manufacturers at press conferences. Al-Baker once held up Qatar's first A380 delivery for 3 months over cabin fitting complaints, telling reporters it cost $200 million. He said it proudly. His philosophy: manufacturers needed him more than he needed them. For a long time that was true, but it had limits nobody had tested. The A350 is built from carbon fiber, not traditional aluminum. Lighter and stronger, but with a problem. When lightning hits aluminum, current flows harmlessly across the surface. Carbon fiber can't do that. Its resistance generates heat near composite structure, causing damage. Airbus's solution: embed a thin copper mesh across every composite section, replicating aluminum's lightning protection. 2 independent layers. Both had to fail simultaneously for any real danger. That had never happened. The paint sat on top of this. Carbon fiber doesn't expand and contract with temperature the way aluminum does. Paint does. That mismatch creates adhesion problems Airbus hadn't fully solved. In late 2020, a Qatar A350 was sent to Shannon, Ireland for a World Cup commemorative livery. When technicians stripped the old paint, the degradation had reached the copper mesh beneath. Not destroyed it, but reached it. Airbus called it cosmetic. Qatar called it a safety crisis. That disagreement, over one aircraft, one layer beneath the paint, would take 2 years and the UK High Court to resolve.
Qatar demanded Airbus identify the root cause, commit to a fix, and pay compensation. Airbus acknowledged the paint adhesion issue was real. They'd already quietly repainted aircraft for Lufthansa under warranty. What they wouldn't do was call it a safety issue because every analysis said it wasn't. EASA investigated and found no airworthiness action required. Singapore Airlines said publicly it wasn't seeing any of the degradation Qatar described. Finnair, Cathay Pacific, Etihad, Air Caribes all had cosmetic paint issues. None grounded their aircraft. Qatar grounded 13. In August 2021, Qatar's Civil Aviation Authority revoked airworthiness certificates on aircraft every other aviation body still considered safe. Airbus noted how convenient it was to ground aircraft at the peak of COVID, when airlines worldwide were already parking excess capacity. By December, Airbus issued a public warning that someone was attempting to misrepresent a cosmetic issue as an airworthiness concern, calling it a threat to international protocols on safety. Qatar filed legal proceedings in London's High Court.
The lawsuit asked for $618 million in base damages, plus $4 million for every single day each grounded aircraft remained out of service. At 13 aircraft, that was $52 million per month accumulating on top. Qatar expected Airbus to flinch. That's how the industry worked. Manufacturers protect relationships. Writing a check is cheaper than losing an order book. Airbus didn't flinch. On January 21, 2022, Airbus canceled Qatar's entire order for 50 A321neo narrow-body jets, not the A350s they were fighting over, but a completely separate contract. The mechanism was a cross-default clause. If either party materially breached one contract, the other could terminate separate ones. Qatar's refusal to accept new A350 deliveries was the breach. The clause activated. The A321neo had a backlog of nearly 5,000 aircraft. Airlines were waiting years for slots. Qatar had lost positions in a queue it couldn't rejoin. Qatar then ordered 50 Boeing 737 MAX jets to replace them. The plane grounded after 2 fatal crashes that killed 346 people. The airline that grounded airworthy A350s over paint was now embracing the MAX. Nobody in the industry missed the irony. Airbus filed a countersuit for $220 million, alleging Qatar and its regulator had colluded in bad faith. By September 2022, all remaining Qatar A350 orders were canceled too. No wide-body orders, no narrow-body orders. Qatar's entire future fleet strategy, gone. Meanwhile, Qatar was bleeding operationally. They'd spent years retiring their A330 fleet, replacing it with A350s. Now they reversed that, dragging mothballed aircraft out of storage, spending millions per plane to bring them back. Then Al Baker, who had publicly called the A380 the biggest mistake in Qatar Airways history and declared it was never coming back, announced it was returning. He called the decision reluctant. Qatar was hosting the FIFA World Cup in 2022. The planes built for that surge were on the tarmac, grounded by a dispute the airline had started. They reactivated 14 A330s and all 10 A380s. The CEO flying planes he called mistakes because the ones he replaced them with weren't flying. In January 2023, Airbus quietly changed the A350's copper foil design in new deliveries. They maintained the original was safe, but they changed it anyway, mid-lawsuit. In January 2023, the court ordered Qatar to produce correspondence with its Civil Aviation Authority relating to the original grounding. Qatar had always argued the regulator acted independently. If true, the paperwork should be simple. 11 days later, they settled. Terms confidential, no admission of liability, orders reinstated, but deliveries originally scheduled for 2023 wouldn't begin until 2026. 3 years late. Akbar Al-Baker resigned. His successor announced a commitment to trust and empowerment. The phrasing was careful. The meaning was not. Those same A350s Qatar grounded as unsafe are flying passengers again. Qatar lost its delivery slots, 3 years of fleet growth, and burned through the World Cup on retired aircraft it called mistakes. It settled 11 days after being asked to produce the evidence its case rested on. The CEO who built the airline on never accepting less than perfection left having accepted terms he couldn't discuss publicly. The cross-default clause was always in the contract. The willingness to use it was a surprise. A paint chip. That's where this started. And by the time it ended, the airline that found it had lost far more than the cost of a repaint.